was 5 years old, I visited your great-grandfather with my father in Sakhachev for the first time. These are the words that Rav Michoel wrote to Rav Hanoch Henech, who was the Avnei Nezer's grandson and the Sakhachev Rebbe at the time. From then onward, I felt spiritually bound to Sakhachev with chains of love, a bond that sustained me throughout my entire life without interruption. A few months after that first visit, I made the trip again on Shushan Purim, going by foot from Lovitch to Sakhachev, a distance of 16 miles. Driven by the great longing that I felt burning in my heart, I longed to see the Rebbe, your great-grandfather. Halavai that I should be privileged to do tshuva, to find the tikkun for my neshama. From then onward, this cord that bound me to Sakhachev was never broken, and it is stronger now, after many, many, many years, I add, than ever before. One of the reasons, as I mentioned, to learn about Rav Michoel is because it gives us a chalon, a window into a world of old-time Hasidus that we can rarely see from an up-close source. And also, it's a world into a Gon Olam. Mamish, the Avnei Nezer himself was something, as we'll see, otherworldly, other-timely, something that's hard to imagine today. And he was close up, but he really saw this man. As I said, he was a Talmud of his for no less than 12 years. The last 12 years of the Avnei Nezer's life, he was there when the Avnei Nezer was nifter. He spoke to him in learning. One of the last conversations that was had was between this young Eloi, who would eventually end up in Baltimore, and bring Sakhachev over to him. And so that's why it's really exciting to discuss more of him. And I just want to say at this moment, as opposed to other Gedolim that I discussed, there's a certain amount of corroboration I have from other sources. Everything I know about Rav Michoel Forshlager is from this book that was printed recently, The Giant of the Torah World, and some of these stories are going to seem otherworldly, and they are, and it was a relative of Rav Michoel that wrote this. It seems like he happens to quote more than a lot of books that I read, quote, where they get the stories from. I always think if I would write a book about Gedolim, you have to write where you got the story from, and you have to give a little bit how you know it was accurate, so I don't know the author, but he was certainly a close relative of Michoel. He certainly knew Rav Michoel, and he's quoting a lot of people. And with that, let's go on. He says, I was so young when I received permission to attend the Shir of the Avnei Nezer that they had to bring me a special elevated chair to sit there. Okay? When I appeared before my master, again, he's all of 14 now, I had already been learning for some time from great Gaonim, the Torah, right? I presented the Rebbe with several of my chidushim, 14. And he asked me where I previously learned. I told him the names of the people I had learned by, and the Avnei Nezer right away said, by the way, Avnei Nezer's name was Avram Bornstein, I should have mentioned. He said, that's not their approach to learning. So he said, a 14-year-old, well, I took my derech from the Chassam Sofer, the Rav of Pressburg. And he said, the Avnei Nezer said, now it's clear to me. And then he confided in me, I also adopted my derech halimud from the Chassam Sofer, which is really nice. Avnei Nezer is cholik on the Chassam Sofer, but he says that's where he got his going. Rav Michoel learned b'chavrusa that period with the Gaon of Koshiglov, who was Avram Tzvi Frumer, the author of Eretz Tzvi, Hashem Yikom Damo, who died in the Holocaust, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, as I mentioned, of Chachmei Lublin, who was also one of the young students. This is a Rav Price, who became a posek in Toronto, who was a contemporary, and he used to call Rav Forshlager his Rebbe, wrote a article about this Tekufa in Rav Forshlager's time. I knew when he was still a young man and learning in Sakhachev that even then, again, he can't be more than 26, he was already famous as a Gaon B'Yisrael, a Talmud Chacham with a phenomenal memory, tremendous asman, and sterling midas. His makam tefillah in the Beis Medrash, in the Sakhachev Beis Medrash, was behind the stove. And listen to this. All of the great Talmidei Chacham who made their way to Sakhachev, right? Sakhachev was a place for Talmidei Chacham to go to speak to the Avnei Nezer, ask him shilas and learning, etc., including Yosef Engel, the great Yosef Engel, and Yoav Yeshua of Kinsk, who was the author of Chelkas Yoav, who we mentioned before, was an old Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. would head to Rav Michoel when they got to Sachachav in order to speak with him and learning. So they're going to see the Avnei Nezer, but they went to the 20, 22-year-old, 18-year-old, I don't know how old, Rav Michoel Forshlager to speak to him and learning. He was an expert, and then we're talking about Rav Michoel, in his Tekuf of Sachachav, so much so that people would say about Rav Michoel, when Rav Michoel get the drei mit dem dashik falavar reis a rashba. When Rav Michoel tips his cap, a rashba falls out. And he knew all the Masechtas entirely by heart, including the precise language used in the commentaries of the Rif and the Ran. He developed the ability to quote the Rishonim word for word by heart after realizing that the Avnei Nezer himself could do so. He saw the Rebbe could quote by heart, so he said, I have to do that also. And he once mentioned to the Gaon Reb Chaim Zimmerman, a famous Gaon in America, when I learned with the Avnei Nezer, I noticed that every time he quoted from the Sefer Chidushei Ramban, he quoted word by heart. So this is this young Eloi soaking in the way of Sachachav, going in the ways of his Rebbe. Now, here he says some interesting things just about how to approach the words of the Gaonim. From what I've written, is obvious that from the great and holy ones like my master, the Avnei Nezer, whose minds are unceasingly occupied with thoughts of Torah, when they're completely disconnected from worldly matters, even their doubts and seemingly strained interpretations, right? The Avnei Nezer would have a dochak, something difficult, are most certainly truer words of Torah than are clearly understood explanations, which are made up of sequences, a refutable logic would seem true. You know, he's saying that the Avnei Nezer's dochak is better than our straight svara. This is how, because the people who are absolutely disconnected from this world and absolutely connected to the words of Torah all the time are zocha to something which is beyond our logic. It's a very, very interesting piska. We must not budge a minuscule nail's breadth from their conclusions. And even if they've forgotten certain passages, nevertheless, their conclusions are correct. And I have expended much time and effort in order to demonstrate the accuracy of their words. So this is the Talmud in a unique base medrash and an unbelievable base medrash. And this is how he saw it.